What's going on, college football fans? This is Andrew Hudson. That's Nathaniel Gilmore. We're back for another week of the Swampy Coliseum Podcast. It's good to talk about college football. Is it not, Nathaniel?
Oh man, especially after the weekend we just had.
Ooh, we got some games to talk about. We're going to start it off with a team coming off a bye. That's my Florida Gators. We're going into a big matchup this week. Heavy matchup, in-state rivalry. It's sad that I'm talking about the UCF game like that, but this will be quite the matchup for the Gators. UCF looking really good this year, coming off a tough loss against Colorado. Their defense really couldn't stop them at all. They gave up 48 points to a Colorado team, which we know is up and down, but man, they looked like they were hitting on all cylinders last weekend. UCF came in as the rushing yards leader in college football. It's weird to say that Colorado held them to 177, but I guess
Yeah.
they did. So really, it was just a master class on Colorado's side, offensively, especially going up and down the field, scoring as much as they wanted to. I mean, we had your boy Travis Hunter striking the pose after an interception. We might have to talk about his Heisman chances. I don't know. I'm not too keen on it. But,
Yeah.
anyways, UCF still looking like a really good team, led by KJ Jefferson, who I'll remind came with Arkansas and beat Florida last year. So, Florida's coming into this game, of course, off of a bye week. We also just came off of a time where players could opt out if they wanted to, still keep their red shirt and come back with the same amount of years next year. Doesn't look like the carnage was too bad for the Gators, but we're getting some rest, coming back. We're gonna need. I mean, we obviously need a similar look to what Colorado just did. Our offense has been our strength, even though it hasn't been amazing because our defense is horrid. But my biggest fear is I don't trust our run defense against UCF, which, as we said, has a great rushing attack. So we're going to have to stop them on the ground. I don't totally trust KJ Jefferson's arm. So if we can potentially get them stymied in the run game, then I think we would have a chance. And our offense just has to be consistent. Right now we're still kind of going back and forth on quarterback, but Mertz is getting more playing time coming off of a great game against Mississippi State, and Lagway played well also. We're still missing Trey Wilson. Looks like he's going to be out for the rest of the year potentially. So our other guys are going to have to step up. And I called for this at the beginning of the year. Our young guys need playing time. They need to touch the ball. Aiden Mizell, I talked about him in our first episode. He is a dynamic playmaker. We just don't get him the ball. Napier is a coach who likes to rely on his older players and you know puts the seniority above things. Sometimes that's got to be scratched. Like sometimes you've got to just go to the ones who are better and who have more ability to do big things. So I'm hoping that, and we're in Gainesville for this game, so I'm hoping that is helpful as well. And yeah, I think we can come away with a victory. And I'm hoping that's not just, rose-colored glasses off of winning at Mississippi State and seeing UCF lose last week, but I'm coming in confident and I'm hoping we can get a win.
Yeah, maybe you need to take a page out of Alabama's book. Those two big plays by two big freshmen on their end. Let the kids play.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, man, what a game that was. We're going to have to talk about it real soon after you give us a little update on USC.
Oh man. Yeah, so last Saturday, whirlwind of a day. At I was at one of my best friend's wedding, so wasn't really able to watch most of these games. And man, I missed the big week, but I was getting ready. I had the USC game on in our little Airbnb, and Wisconsin goes up 21-10 at halftime, and it just did not look good. The offense looked slow. We had first drive, we go out the gates just moving the ball at will. And then Miller Moss had an interception. Zachariah Branch muffed a punt. And just the offense wasn't really looking good. Um, we missed Jay Fair missed a big play to get a first down to get within field goal range, and offense looked like a mess. The defense, we have a problem with like letting up big plays, but not like last year. Last year we let up big plays because we couldn't stop anyone. This year, just like the one mistake we make just ends up being a touchdown. They scored on a 60-yard pass on one of the weakest double moves I've ever seen. And somehow it got Jacoby Covington. We blitzed pretty much everyone that play. They just made a good play. Yeah, and then the two other touchdowns were off of broken tackles. So I mean, it was scary in that first half, but both sides of the ball adjusted. We outscored them 28-0 in the second half. Ended up covering the game. You know what they say: good teams win, great teams cover. So, but I mean, overall, Miller Moss was still so much pressure in his face. That offensive line is honestly just such a big weak point. But the best news to come out is Jacoby Lane. Talked about him a lot in the preseason. He just showed out. We didn't have a number one target. We just tried to spread it to everyone because we had so many talented guys. But this kid, wearing the Dwayne Jarrett number, he looked like Dwayne Jarrett. I mean, 10 receptions, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. The 2 touchdowns were highlight reel catches. He also had another one going across the middle. He gets hit in the head, helmet flies off. He lands on the ground. He gets up, sticks his tongue out, starts shaking his head like a wild man, and just, oh man, that was inspiring. But it was a big game. It was the first USC's first Big Ten game, and I mean, yeah, defense shut them down in the second half, and we just need to figure out how to get these second half performances and just entire game because we had great second halves against LSU, Michigan, and now Wisconsin. And it's like, all right, how do we start hot? Um, but yeah, moving on to next week, we're playing Minnesota at Minnesota. I think that's going to be an interesting game. Minnesota not having the best of seasons, and their running game has just been pretty much non-existent. Also, other breaking news, we didn't really talk about it because we recorded after, but you were talking about the red shirts leaving.
Yep, I
Bear
was gonna bring it up.
Alexander, yeah, Bear Alexander redshirted, and
Mm.
he's gonna be leaving after the season. Doesn't want to work with probably the best defensive line coach in the nation. That's my opinion. But
Hmm.
you can go and leave. But Devin Tompkins came in, did a great job, and Bear was getting second string minutes anyway, so we didn't feel his miss his presence really that much. But yeah, I think USC should be an easy game. Minnesota not doing so hot out of the gates. They have no running game. They're relying too much on their quarterback, Max Brosmer. And I saw a stat here where if he gets pressured, Brosmer has a 37% completion rate.
Mm.
So he did the game on defense, just pressure, throw pressure, and yeah, we're gonna stop the run, pressure the quarterback, and we should be good to go. And on the other side, on offense, we just honestly just keep doing what we're doing. I think we have athletes. We just out athlete them all over the place. Miller Moss, keep him standing. I think we need to go target Jacoby Lane and Deuce Robinson, our two big physical receivers. And once we started doing that last week, just all the little wheel routes and all the reverses and stuff to Zachariah Branch opened up. So get Zachariah in space, hit those two receivers. Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner, our running backs, have just been absolutely fantastic. Keep feeding them the ball early instead of trying to do whatever fancy stuff early in the game. But yeah, I think this should be an easy game. I said that last week, and for the first
Hmm.
half, I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, hoping so. But that brings us to some games to talk about. I mean, we've got to start off with what could be the game of the year. Georgia at Alabama. They went in to the Hornets' Nest there at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and what a classic game we had. Alabama came off firing. I mean, we were having a little actually community get together in our neighborhood here, and I had the TV on, and so I was just kind of in and out looking in the first half. Alabama went right down and scored. The next time I looked at the TV, it was 21 to nothing. And it was just great. The onslaught, Georgia, turnovers, could not take care of the ball, went down 30-7 at halftime. And then they flipped the script. They went 19 straight, or they went on a 27-3 run in the second half and were able to come back all the way back to take a 1 point lead before, of course, Alabama scored there at the end with Ryan Williams doing a pirouette job along the sideline and winning the game ultimately 41-34. But don't take away, Georgia came right back down the field
Oh
and
yeah.
had a shot at the end zone before Carson Beck was intercepted once again at the end of the game. Man, what a classic we had in Tuscaloosa.
Man. I think there's these two stats that I kind of saved that I wanted to mention. One for each side. So Jalen Milroe is the first player in SEC history with 350 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, and an 80% completion percentage in a game.
Mm.
Insane. And on the other side, Carson Beck is the seventh quarterback to throw for 400 plus yards against Alabama in the past 20 seasons.
Mm.
However, Alabama is 7-1 in those games.
Wow.
7-1. So they
Oof.
find ways to just stop, like, you can't do both. You're gonna just do one or the other type thing. But watching that game, man, I think it's a little concerning that that Georgia just had that many mistakes. And
Yeah.
I think that was one thing that I mentioned when we're previewing this game is, we've seen Alabama just turn it on. We haven't seen, Georgia do it after slow starts. But the exact opposite happened where Georgia slow start and it's like, oh, they haven't been able to turn it on late. Maybe it was Alabama playing soft coverage, but they just ran back. And I think Kirby Smart, that just shows a very mentally resilient team. And then Alabama, after an amazing first half where it felt like they scored every single time they touched the ball, slowed down at the end. I think Georgia started to figure out how to stop Jalen Milroe a little bit. And then Jalen Milroe was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw the ball, just lob it up to a 17-year-old, which happens to be probably the best wide receiver in the country. And I think after this week, we're going to have to, I know we're talking about Heisman stuff later, but Jalen Milroe, man, might have to start climbing that list.
Yeah, he's vaulted his name up the list. Absolutely. He now, after 4 games, it still has at least 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns in every game he's played.
That's insane.
He, you see this, and I saw this first, I feel like in memory, looking at Lamar Jackson in college, where the quarterback was also the fastest player on the field.
Yeah.
When you're watching Jalen Milroe, he had the 35-yard touchdown. He wrapped it around the corner and then sprinted down the sideline. It looked like no one had a chance
Yeah.
at him. The defensive backs couldn't catch him. They couldn't touch him. He is a freak of nature. And it makes me think when talking about that Heisman race, wishing I would think more about that. Because I mean, just take Jaden Daniels last year winning the Heisman, who was dynamic, doing things passing and running that we've never seen before. Jalen Milroe is doing very similar things right now with a skill set that just looks
Yeah.
unhuman. It's
Like, how do you
wild.
stop that?
How do you stop it being that good as a passer. 27 of 33 he was in this game. He was lights out.
Yeah.
374 passing yards, along with over 100 on the ground, 2 touchdowns each. I mean, wow, this guy is amazing. And even with all that happening, Georgia still took the lead
Yeah.
with a few minutes left. I
Insane.
mean, to go opposite of your point you made before, with Georgia going down like that, even though that's disappointing, at least you can say, hey, we played awful. We
Yeah.
played about the worst quarter of football we could play, and we still had a chance at the end. If we can just fix those
Hmm.
minor things in the beginning, we can beat anyone, which is totally right. So, oh, it was just such a fun game to watch. We had a friend over and we're able to watch that whole second half together. And and at the end of the game, I was trying to make some popcorn or trying to, every time
You
I'd
can't.
walk out of the room, something else happened. So I just had to lock in. But oh, what a great game. And we most likely will see a rematch at some
Yeah.
point this year, I would guess.
Yeah, and the way that game ended, you kind of have to feel good about Georgia in that rematch where they kind of figured it out. And now Alabama, Kalen DeBoer. I mean, giving Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe, kind of giving going back to your past point, unfair. How did we not think that this was just unfair of a combination? Seeing what he's done with quarterbacks, seeing what he did with Michael Penn, man. But yeah, I think Georgia might have to be favored if they do meet up again. But Georgia has a tough road ahead. Who knows if they make it to the SEC championship?
Yeah, who knows? They've got to play Texas. They've got really tough games still coming up, which brings us to the rest of the games for this week. Let's quickly go through a good amount of them that we wanted to talk about. First, one we didn't mention in our pre-show. Let's go back to Friday night. How about Miami, Virginia Tech? Nathaniel, was it a catch?
Okay, this is my man. Okay, so I had ulterior motives. I have one of my best friends. He big Miami fan. Oh, big Miami fan since this year. Hasn't talked a lick about football to me until this year. He's making fun of me. He's like, once USC lost, he's like, oh, Miami doesn't have a loss. I'm like, dude, whatever. So I'm rooting against Miami for the rest of the year, but especially this game. I will say, with all that bias, it was not a catch, but they should have called it a catch because if you call it on the field and you
Yeah.
look at that video, there is no, it shouldn't have been called a touchdown to start off. But since it was called a touchdown, there's no way you can call that an incomplete. Like watching that play, the amount of times I rewatched that, and everyone in America rewatched that, and how no one could come up with, is that a catch? Is that not? There's no conclusive evidence. So I don't think it was a catch, but I also don't think they had any any reason to turn it into an incomplete pass. Especially not the reason they said where they said, oh, he was touching the ball when he was out of bounds. It's like, all right, dude. Like, man had his feet on the ground holding onto the ball before that. Are you not going to call that? I think the ACC just wanted to protect their only playoff hope besides maybe Clemson.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like a rolling on the field stands situation because there
Yeah.
was not inconclusive evidence, but they overturned it. Miami got the win that they probably deserved, and
Yeah.
they're still undefeated. Cam Ward's still up in that Heisman race. That was a fun one to watch. Let's move over to a tough loss. We had Ole Miss losing at home to Kentucky,
Man.
20-17, where their offense just shut down ultimately. I mean, looking at their, I was able to watch most of the second half of that game, and they scored a touchdown to go up 17-13 with 10 seconds left in the third. So all their whole fourth quarter, their drives were 3-and-out punt. Then they had 3-and-out punt, and then they were able to drive down the field, but missed a 48-yard field goal that ended up losing them the game with 48 seconds to go. I mean, their offense, which is supposed to, I mean, obviously very highly touted, they shut down at the end of the game. And I mean, credit again to Mark Stoops and the Kentucky defense, Brock Vandegrift being able to lead them to a win after we were just so hard on them before. And we've already seen Kentucky do this once. They held Georgia to 13 points and narrowly lost that game, but this time they were able to pull it out. The offense was able to drive right down the field and score a touchdown at the end to give themselves the lead, and the defense held on. So crazy win for Kentucky and a tough loss there for Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at that game, that's something that can't happen if you're Ole Miss. I mean, this is a team you're playing a team that got boat raced by South Carolina. I mean, they played tough with Georgia, but it seemed more on the part that Georgia just did not really, they just weren't clicking at all that game. And now you look kind of their next couple games, we're going to go over this game later, but they're playing South Carolina at South Carolina. Then they're going to go play LSU in LSU, and then
Yep.
you play Oklahoma. So 3 straight games where you're gonna have like that's the tough part of their schedule, and you can't be messing up on games this early. And it kind of feels like this program is they kind of put all their chips in for this year. Jackson Dart's a
Yeah.
senior. You get all these weapons for this 1 year, and you you get your first loss against Kentucky. Like, I mean, they're 12, which means they're in that playoff hunt still. But I mean, now the test begins. Now you see how mentally strong your team is.
Yeah, and 2 games after that stretch, they're playing Georgia.
Yeah,
So tougher ahead for them. And look, Trey Harris is a great receiver for Ole Miss. He had 11 catches for 176. The rest of their receivers, or the rest of the people who had receptions in the game, 1 reception, 2 receptions, 3 receptions, 1 reception. That was
yeah,
it.
insane,
They've
insane.
they've got to find a way to get the ball to other playmakers who can actually make things happen. Or else, if they're only a one-man band of Trey Harris, then they're not going to survive in the SEC. So tough one
Yeah,
to watch.
that's
Watch another
where.
game. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that's where missing a guy like Judkins comes in, and I
Yeah.
think Bentley, Ulysses Bentley, I think he's been out for a couple weeks too. So, or he hasn't really been playing much, I guess. He was supposed to kind of be that guy, but yeah. Going on to other games. One game I want to highlight is in the ACC-ish, Notre Dame, Louisville.
Yeah.
ACC adjacent, if you will.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a tough game. I mean, kind of watching that. Scores 31-24. So quick math here was that 9 total scores, 4 touchdowns for Notre Dame, 3 for Louisville, and then a field goal each. But only 3 drives the entire game that ended in scores were like they didn't have short field for both
Mm.
teams. So 3 out of 9. I mean, it was just kind of funny to watch. There was a fumble off of a kickoff to start the game, then Louisville scores a touchdown. There was a play where Tyler Shuck ran like 46 yards, fumbles at the end. Notre Dame gets it, scores a touchdown. Multiple going for it on fourth. They don't get it. It was just a wild game. I think Riley Leonard threw the ball well enough. I think he actually completed more than 50% of his passes, didn't throw an interception, ran the ball pretty well. It was just, yeah. Louisville, honestly, if you look at the stats, Louisville outgained them, but
Yes.
like by a lot, by over 100 yards. And it just so many turnovers. And it wasn't
Yeah.
really a game like, all right, whoever plays the best is going to win. It's whoever makes the most out of the other guy's mistake.
Right. Yeah. Make the least amount. I was gonna say Team A, 19 first downs. Team B, 11.
Yeah.
Team A, 7 of 17 on third downs. Team B, 2 of 10. Total yards, Team A, 395. Team B, 280. Team B won the game.
Yeah.
It sounds like they played much worse, but Notre
Yeah.
Dame was Team B and they came out with a 7-point victory.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting now, like playoff chances, watching that game, that didn't give you any for Notre Dame, any hope. Like any oh yeah, a little confidence, this is a good team. They won by 7
Mm.
against a top 15 team, and you kind of feel a little worse after where you're like, wow, this offense
Ugh.
has it's still not put it together, but they are 4-1, and their offense has not played well pretty much all year, and their losses to Northern Illinois, which
Yeah,
if they could play well against good teams, hey, props to them.
more power to them. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
you were gonna give us a little tour through the Big 12, huh?
Oh, oh yeah. Oh man. All right. All right. If we're gonna start beginning of the year, we'll go way back, beginning of the year. I was saying Oklahoma State. I raved about they're a bunch of veterans. They have a super old quarterback. They have a great running back. It's what you want in a crazy Big 12. And I said Utah State. I mean Utah. Sorry, not Utah State. Utah State is also trash, but Utah was not good, and they're gonna get exposed. What has happened then? I've been high on Oklahoma State, and they have lost every time. I was high on Kansas State 1 week, and they lost. I took back everything I said and gave props to Utah against everything in my heart. And then they go and lose to Arizona.
Mm.
So, Big 12, I mean, what I think now it's wide open. Before it was wide open, now it's even more wide open. I mean, we have Colorado. They have been picking up wins. They were kind of thrown out at the beginning of the year. Um, they just beat UCF, and they might be a contender if they keep playing like that. Kansas State, they kind of position themselves kind of right back up there. BYU, so, I mean, who would have thought? We are how many weeks in, and the top contenders are in the Big 12 are BYU, Colorado, and Kansas State.
Wow. Yeah, it is not as expected. And man, I watched that Oklahoma State Kansas State game and just Kansas State is just so fun to watch. And it
Yeah,
makes me wish that I picked them at the beginning of the year just because it's
yeah,
so fun to watch Avery Johnson run around and
yeah,
make
right?
plays, chuck it all around the field. Alan Bowman's back there. I'll tell you what, my man cannot step into a throw. He throws off his
No,
back foot every
every time.
time. Like it's one of those things where you think a quarterback coach would tell him, "Hey, how about you try and stop this?" But it doesn't matter if it's a deep ball, if it's a little drag route, if it's dumping it off to the running back, he's falling away as he throws it every time. And it just got to me. They still can't really get Ollie Gordon going. I mean, he averaged 5 yards a carry, but only 76 rushing yards on the day. He has been stagnated all season. So definitely another good win for Kansas State there. But yeah, the whole Big 12 is just jumbled up. And
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know what to say about it. I don't know what to expect for the rest of the year, but it seems like the conference that's in the most question.
yeah. Like, yeah. I mean, I said all I can say. I also wanted to add, you'd think Alan Bowman. How when do you think his career started in college football?
Let's say, well, I was actually just kind of seeing it. Was it 19?
2018, when he
Was
was
it
a
really?
true freshman at Texas. Like I remember him getting the starting job at Texas Tech.
Wow.
And like I was still oh wait, no, I guess that was my first year out of college. Oh wait, no, that was my first year of college.
Yeah.
Man, we have gone through so much. So we were the same high school class, and man, this This guy is still playing.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I think he's two high school classes behind me, and I've been out of high school for 8.5 years. So, man,
Oh
that
man.
is quite the journey for him, as we know we've talked about with many quarterbacks in college football
Yeah.
right now. But
Yeah.
along with that, just a quick comment on our preseason predictions. So, like you said, we both picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. Definitely questionable on that choice. Both my national champion, Georgia, and my Heisman pick, Jackson Dart, both took tough losses this week. So certainly in question for those two. Your guy, Quinn Ewers, has been out for a couple weeks. So I'm not liking his chances to win the Heisman, but you still have Ohio State as your champion. So they're
Yeah.
undefeated, but tough week right now for us. So
Yeah.
we'll have
I
to
think
we'll have to keep looking at it.
yeah. Yeah, Ohio State on that point haven't really played anyone. They're about to hit a rough stretch. I think they're playing like Iowa and a couple other teams coming up. So, well, Georgia's been, they've been tested a little bit so far. So it's now Ohio State's turn.
Definitely. Well, let's take a pause here and let's hit our trivia question. Nathaniel's got the trivia for me this week. He said it's going to be a little interesting. So, what do we got?
Yeah. All right. So I didn't script this, but you talked about this a little earlier when you're mentioning Jalen Milroe and Heisman and, scoring touchdowns, stuff like that. So I went through the last five Heisman winners minus Devontae Smith, so last five quarterbacks. I'm going to
Okay,
give them to you, but I
sure.
want you to rank them from 1 to 5 in passing yards, and then I'll like let you know if you're right and all that stuff, and then you'll rank them 1 to 5 in total touchdowns. I was going to do passing
Okay.
touchdowns, but the list was almost identical. I'm like, okay, we have some rushing QBs, so we're gonna, you know, let them have them show their skill sets. But
Okay, so passing yards and then
passing yards
total
first, and
touchdowns.
then total touchdowns. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So be five QBs. I'll name them out right now if you need me to remind you or anything
I'll
like
type them.
that. Okay. All right. So we have first we have Kyler Murray in what 2018. Then we
Hmm.
have Joe Burrow,
Yep.
2019. Then we have Bryce Young, 2021. Caleb Williams, 2022. Then Jaden Daniels, 2023. So 1 through 5, highest to lowest, not lowest to highest, highest to lowest. Passing yards. What are your thoughts?
Man, passing yards. Okay. We know Burrow went crazy in 2019. So
Hmm.
I know he had 60 touchdowns and where was like passing touchdowns. Now where
Yeah.
was he at in yards? He's definitely up there. Those Oklahoma guys went wild as well. I'm thinking, trying to think of how many they would have. Daniels was such a dual threat. I just don't know if I could put him as high on the passing yard total. So do you want me to just give you 1 through 5 and you tell me what I get?
Yeah. Yeah. 1 through 5, or if you want to do 1, 5, 2, 4, 5, 3,
I'll
whatever.
just give you my 1 through 5 because it might just be a lot of no's if you keep if
Oh
I
yeah,
go
no,
one at a
just
time.
give me the list and then I'll let you know
Okay,
kind of yeah.
let's go. Ugh. Okay, I'm just gonna have to put Burrow one, and then I'll go that high flying attack of Kyler Murray two. Then I'll go with, Alabama has such a good run game as well there with Bryce Young. So I'll say, let me go Caleb Williams three. I'll go Jaden Daniels four and Bryce Young five. I'm not super confident in that. but what do we look like?
All right. So first, Joe Burrow nailed it. He had 5,671 yards, 800 more yards than number two, Bryce Young.
Really?
You got to think that
4,800?
he had 4,872,
Wow.
which kind of
Oh.
made sense because you got to think that year, no, that offensive line honestly wasn't amazing. Their running
Mm,
game was mid, even though I think they did have Najee that year, but their running game wasn't amazing, and he was just
wow.
slinging that thing. But yeah, Bryce Young at two. Then you got right back on track with Caleb Williams at three with
Okay.
4,537.
Okay.
And
Wow.
then four was Kyler Murray, which you
Okay.
had two, but I mean, you had more than Jaden Daniels. So honestly, your only one you really got wrong was Bryce Young,
Sure. Young.
putting him,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, you're
Wow.
spot
What
on.
what
Jaden,
a what a total there. What was Jaden Daniels' yards?
3,812.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think he hit 4,000.
No,
So,
yeah,
whew. Boy, yeah, that's quite the list there. Burrow, I know he had
insane,
the best passing
absolutely
season of all
insane.
time. I
Yeah,
don't know that it can ever be surpassed. I mean,
yeah,
that was a 15 game season, meaning he averaged 4 passing touchdowns a game. Average
yeah.
4 a game. Then yards, he's at three 350? No, 400? He's almost averaging 400, like
Yeah.
375 or something. That is just more than video game numbers, honestly.
Yeah,
Okay,
insane.
now we got total touchdowns.
Total touchdowns, yeah, because the list would have literally been identical if it was just passing.
Ah, okay, man. Yeah, what did Jaden Daniels have after last year? Because he had so many. Williams, Caleb Williams, and Murray both had rushing touchdowns as well. Bryce Young, not as much. But the passing. See, I might put Bryce Young last on this one just because he's not as much of a runner as the others. But I've still got to put Burrow one with 60 passing touchdowns, and he had some rushing as well. So I'm gonna put him up there. Then I'll go. Let me go ahead and have Jaden Daniels two. Let's say, uh, hmm. Okay, let's say Caleb Williams three again, Bryce Young. Oh, and then Kyler Murray five. How can I do that? Oh my goodness.
Are you locking that in, or you want to make?
Hold on, give me a second. Type it out, and then
Yeah.
I'll see. Yeah, that's I mean, they're all so good, so I can't be mad about having that. Sure, let's have it there.
Okay, locking it in.
Yeah.
So number one, indeed, Joe Burrow. He had
Okay.
60 passing touchdowns and five rushing touchdowns, total of 65. He had the second least amount of rushing touchdowns, which was kind of surprising to me looking at all
Hmm.
the other quarterbacks. Um, Number two, Kyler Murray.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. What was his total?
He had 54 total, 42
Wow.
passing, and 12
12.
rushing, which was the highest out of any of these guys.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So then we had Caleb Williams, again,
Okay.
nailed him at the three spot both times.
Okay.
He had 52 with 42 passing, 10 rushing.
10. Hmm.
And so these last two, so you had Young and Murray. So last two were actually tied with Young and Daniels, both
Hmm.
having 50, but
Wow.
Bryce Young had 47 passing and Jaden Daniels had 40 passing.
Okay, so he had 40 and 10.
Yeah, and then Bryce Young had 47 and 3.
4,800 passing yards and 47 touchdowns. Oh my
He's like
goodness,
that.
Bryce
He was
Young.
like that. I mean, it was that what? It was the race between him and CJ Stroud, and
There's a reason I was so confident in him being the number one pick, and golly, that's been the wrong choice by a
yeah,
mile.
yeah.
But okay, wow. That's a great question. That was really good. I like that. So some Heisman winners, some stats behind those guys. I mean, even comparing them, no one can take away. Those are five amazing seasons that those
Amazing.
guys
Yeah.
put together. And I saw an interesting stat too that Caleb Williams is one of these, but three losses is the most that a Heisman winner has had in the last, I think, 25 years. They were saying, I know Tim Tebow had three losses, Caleb Williams, or sorry, Jaden Daniels, I know did. How many did Caleb Williams have?
He also had three.
Yeah, three as well. So those guys, they were talking about it with the Travis Hunter conversation, seeing basically how many wins does Colorado need to have in order for him to win
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Heisman. But man, that's some good stuff. Well, great trivia question. I'll have another one for you coming up next week. Let's head back to the top 25 and hit our risers and fallers. I'll give you mine to start off. I'll hit you with my biggest riser of the week. For me, that's going to be an interesting conversation about what's going on with UNLV right now. UNLV has had all this drama about their quarterback situation, right? Last week we were mentioning the different situations. This was an NIL deal. Their quarterback had been promised $1 million NIL deal. To this point, had not received it. So he said, I'm out. You haven't filled up your end of the bargain, so I'm leaving. And we're an undefeated team. We're actually having more hopes this year than we would have thought in the past, but I'm out. So all this drama coming. I heard maybe there's another running back or something that joined him.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
they're starting. Yeah.
even from that, the some other players came out on their team and said, that's fine. We're good with our
Yeah.
backup. Haj Malik, we're good with him. It'll be great. UNLV comes out after all that drama and beats Fresno State 59-14. I mean, this Haj Malik guy goes 13 of 16 for 182 and three touchdowns, and on the ground, 12 carries for 119 and another score. Should he have been the starter all along? I don't know. But UNLV jumping their way into the top 25 now at 4-0. Even after everything that went on, they look like they could be a real player there.
Yeah. I mean, UNLV, man. I was just waiting on the downfall, but I mean, normally players, when stuff like that happens, the other players are like, oh, like it's fine. And you're like, oh yeah, they say that until they start getting blown out.
I mean, yeah, they rallied around this backup quarterback. They their defense was stellar. I mean, Fresno State ended up with 30 rushing yards, with a
Jeez.
bunch of sacks factoring into that. So defense played great. Offense obviously torched Fresno State, but UNLV still holding on strong. Who's your biggest riser?
So mine didn't rise as much as yours, but I mean, we've talked about them. They've kind of risen in my perception of them, and that's Alabama. I mean, once Nick Saban left, it was, oh, it's just Kalen DeBoer, who cares type thing. And it's kind of Georgia and Kirby Smart, it's their turn. Like that was kind of the perception of the last 10 was Nick Saban, this 10 is going to be Kirby Smart. And Kalen DeBoer and company just showed up. I mean, they showed up ready. They showed up firing. They had some questions in that secondary that just got absolutely exploited in the second half. But man, they look good. And watching kind of that game, they dominated in the trenches. Like they just seemed in the lines and just in general, they just seemed more physical. They seemed
Hmm.
like they had just better athletes. And it's not all because of Nick Saban, because like I was saying earlier, Ryan Williams and then I'm forgetting the cornerback's name, but on both sides, the guy that got the pick, And the guy that's
Yep.
been torching everyone, they're both freshmen that are Kalen DeBoers. So, I mean, I think this kind of put Alabama at the top of the national championship, talks. And now you're like, oh, shoot, is this, is the roll tide train going to continue rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. With Jalen Milroe, the way he was looking with their stars coming together is was scary for the rest
Yeah.
of the country to see. How about your biggest faller?
Biggest faller, you know, I really want this to be the last time I ever talk about this team. We talked about them earlier, Oklahoma State. There's other teams I could have picked, but
Oh,
I want this to be it. I want to just clean my slate. I made a bad call at the beginning of the year. Each week I doubled down and I said, this is when they're gonna click. This is when they're gonna click. They have a quarterback that has been in college since 2018. Like it's gonna click. And it's never clicked. Mike Gundy, supposed to be a great head coach. I'm sure he is, but is the new age coming back to bite him? Who knows? Are they going to go on a crazy run after this? Maybe. But I'm tired of putting faith and hope in them that they're gonna turn things around. I'm done. Oklahoma State, biggest faller. They dropped out of the top 25. Maybe they'll be able to turn things around, but they haven't for the last 5 weeks.
yeah. We're about over talking about them. I think it's pretty frustrating. And I said the same thing last week when I made my pick and chose not to pick them. I chose to pick Kansas State instead. I said, I'm moving off of this thing. I'm going with Kansas State. But the biggest faller for me is a team that we've also talked about already, but it's Ole Miss. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky at home. I'll remind everyone, and it just didn't look good. Their offense supposed to be highly touted, supposed to be. I mean, they're leading in all the statistical categories right now, offensively and defensively, really, because their games so far have been Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Wake Forest, and Georgia Southern. Those were their four tune-up games
Yeah.
before heading into SEC play. And right when they finally play a big boy, they lose. And I mean, Kentucky's more of a middle boy. They're
Yeah.
not necessarily not even a big boy, but at least SEC play, and they lose. So they drop in the polls, but what does this mean for the rest of their year? They have three ranked matchups still to come in the season. They've got a whole SEC slate that is on deck, and we've been talking about them almost as a shoe-in
Yeah.
for the playoffs, but who knows? They could definitely fall out if they're not careful. So Ole Miss is my biggest faller. Mm. That brings us to a big point of the week. That is our picks. We are making our picks to see who we believe will win this week. So far in the season, I am 15 and 11. Nathaniel right behind me at 14 and 12. We both had 3 and 2 weeks that we're coming off of with a couple games that we flip flopped on, but some got wrong, some got right. So we're even coming out of last week with, of course, that big Georgia Alabama game being the highlight of it all. We've got 4 or 5 more matchups this week. Only one of them is two ranked teams against each other, but we've got some good conference games for sure. Some that maybe shouldn't be conference games, but are, but we're going to talk about them nonetheless. So let's start off with our first game. We've got number 9 Missouri traveling to play number 25 Texas A&M. As you said before, tied for 25, Texas A&M with UNLV. Texas A&M is a 2-point favorite here, and we've got our picks. For my thoughts on this first game, Missouri is coming in as the number 9 ranked team in the country, but they obviously fell a little bit when they struggled against Vanderbilt, but they're still a very strong team, a top 10 team coming off of a great season last year. And Texas A&M has had a lot of questions, but has pretty much stayed the course. Even with Connor Weigman out, their backup quarterback has been very good. They're playing at home in this game, and it makes it a really tough choice, but I just am still confident, even with what's gone on, I'm still confident in Missouri's ability to win this game and continue on. They Brady Cook is a good starting quarterback. Eli Drinkwitz could be a player for a bigger job if he ever wants his way out of Missouri. So I think they'll have the ability to walk into Texas A&M and still get a victory.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a tough one to pick because I mean Missouri has that number 9 next to their name, but they have not played like
Hmm.
it. I
No.
think honestly that 9 is just there because they started so high at the beginning of the year. Um, and I think on Texas A&M side, it's a funny situation. I think of it kind of like the Malik Willis, Jordan Love situation where okay, Jordan Love's the better quarterback, right? But
Hmm.
they're 0-2 with him starting, and they're 2-0 with Malik Willis starting. And I mean, Marcel Reed, he has been playing pretty, as a freshman, he's been playing really well. And I think Weigman is a game time decision, but
Mm.
it's like, do you just keep riding the hot hand here? I think Mike Elko's team has been playing really tough. I mean, they've been close games, but they've been all gritty games. And it just kind of looked like how all his Duke games looked, where they're not going to blow anyone out, but they're just going to lean on you and they're going to
Hmm.
push on you. And I mean, it's that Notre Dame game was kind of the only time where they just didn't do that well. And who was quarterback? Connor Weigman. So, I mean,
Mm.
do you go Marcel Reed? I mean, that's gonna factor into who I pick, but I said Missouri was my biggest faller 2 weeks in a row, so I think I have to stand by, and I think
Mm.
Texas A&M is gonna win this game. It's at Kyle Field too, so
Yeah, it is at home, which is a dangerous place for Missouri to walk into. And it almost seems like they're due, right? They're due for a loss. So
yeah.
we're picking opposite there, but we'll move forward. Our second game is number 10, Michigan, traveling out west to play the Washington Huskies. Washington, a 2.5 point favorite here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this one's weird. I was just scanning for games just because there was one ranked matchups after we've been blessed with so many the last couple weeks. Um, but this one caught my eye because Washington, they lost to Rutgers, they lost to Washington State, but they're still a favorite.
Mm.
And it's not because they're doing anything crazy. I mean, Will Rogers is having a pretty solid year. He has 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has an insane 174 quarterback rating.
Mm.
But I mean, this team hasn't looked like, the Kalen DeBoer teams of past. But I think this line is just purely based off of Michigan. I think Michigan, they've won their last 2 weeks against Minnesota and USC. But their offense, if you take away big explosive run plays, which hard to create. You got to give them credit for creating those. But if you take those out, they've only had one drive. Oh, wait, no, they actually haven't had a drive all season where they've scored a touchdown with.
Wow.
So it's tough to like kind of put faith into that offense. Um, so because of that, I think at Washington, think they find a way to win this game.
Mm. Big one. Yeah, like you were saying, it's so interesting how they are the favorite in this game. But they do have even with losing their coach, even with losing their quarterback and so many playmakers, that's still a team that was in the playoffs
Yeah.
last year and has a lot of talent coming back. And I mean, it's so interesting because it's also the national champion from last
Hmm.
year coming and having a matchup against each other. So coming into it for me, uh, you mentioned what happens when they don't have those big plays, but my question is, are they still going to get those big plays? Because if they do, then you can't fault them for getting their
Yeah,
victories
exactly.
off of
Yeah.
that. So looking at that as well, they're really relying on that running game. And Will Rogers has been fantastic, but he hasn't faced a defense like Michigan to this point. And so I'm trusting in the Wolverines to go out west and stay strong and get another victory. I think Washington is going to start to show their colors of what they're really like. I mean, Will Rogers, this is a Mississippi State transfer who really leads the SEC in like all passing categories for the
Yeah.
most part. He in that air raid offense was just crazy. But now going out to Washington, I think that they're gonna see at the end of the day they just don't have enough to stand up a bit against the bigger teams in the Big Ten that they're going to be facing. So I've got Michigan. Our next one on the docket, we have number 15 Clemson traveling to the team. We said we weren't going to talk, Nathaniel. We said we weren't going to talk about him anymore. But for some reason, we've got Florida State on our list here. Oh man, I mean, this is an easy pick for me, but let's talk about it a little bit. Florida State at home looks like they're going to be without DJ Uiagalelei. Brock Glenn is going to be stepping in his place, who has been awful. I think in his career is 19 of 51 passing the ball. Uh, DJ has a broken finger, they're saying. I don't know if that's just an excuse to get him out, but Brock Glenn will be starting this game. I don't know if he'll be finishing the game. FSU fans, I know, are pretty high on their freshman, uh, Kromenhoek, Luke Kromenhoek,
Yeah,
who highly touted. He's supposed to be the future there, so maybe he'll get some playing time in this game. But Clemson, 3-1, just showed their strength in the last victory that they had last week against Stanford, winning 40-14. And I think that's going to continue here. The offense for Florida State just can't get anything done. And I don't think that's going to start this week. Clemson will overpower them. I could see them having a similar victory, maybe 38-17. I don't even know what that means. Maybe 38-10, because I don't see Florida State standing up against them.
yeah. I mean, I kind of put this here because it's just giving us a couple easy ones, Once in a while, all these ones have been tough. Um, but yeah, Clemson's gonna run them over. I think it's funny going into this year. It was kind of all right, Dabo, like why aren't you touching, the transfer portal? Florida State's thriving using the transfer portal, and I think this was kind of circled at the beginning of the year of like, hey, let's see which of these two philosophies, is going to work. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been 4 or 5 games, and man, the stark contrast, like you see the mental, I've been saying mental fortitude a lot today, but just Clemson gets destroyed by Georgia, and then their offense starts picking it up. They start finding the pieces, and they're just rolling right now. And then Florida State, and that kind of speaks to these guys grew up, in the system together. They've been in the Clemson system, so they trust in the system. They trust in their brothers. Then you go over to Florida State, they have a rough week one, you know, but they have looked worse every single game after that. Even they had a win against Cal, which we'll talk about later. They looked worse than before. And they scored what, 2 touchdowns? And oh man, yeah, each week and they had that horrible loss against SMU. And you can tell it's a bunch of, guys that they pulled from the portal. Do they care about each other? Who's to say? But I mean, yeah, I'm going to Clemson here.
Yeah. I like the pick. Also, being a Florida guy, it gives me a team that I know a little bit more about. I can talk about them. I have some more intel on the FSU team, which is nice. But we're going back to a game we've talked about endlessly today. Our next pick is going to be Ole Miss traveling to South Carolina to play at Williams-Brice Stadium, a team who beat the team that Ole Miss lost to last week. Big one here, a comeback game for Ole Miss. Who you got winning here?
Man, this is hard. I mean, South Carolina, they have one loss on the season, and in that loss, they looked good still. They played, it was that LSU game, and you can say the only reason they lost, I mean, Sellers got hurt, and then that's when they couldn't score, and LSU kind of took the lead then. But yeah, South Carolina looks legit. I mean, their offense is just like you're saying with Kansas State, so fun to watch. They have Sellers, they have Sanders, and they just run fast and they run everywhere. And I mean, this is going to be a real challenge for Ole Miss's defense, which I mean, Kentucky looks inept on offense every single time they touch the field. Like Vandergriff against Georgia, that was one of the worst quarterbacking performances I've ever
Hmm.
seen in a close game, in a high level SEC game. And he looked good against Ole Miss. So, I
Yeah.
mean, different styles. It'll be really interesting to see if Ole Miss can kind of turn it back up. And I think for the sake of Ole Miss, and I still love Jackson Dart, I'm gonna go with Ole Miss, but I'm not. They're a 9 point favorite. I'm not sure they should be, but I'm going Ole Miss.
Yeah, man. Oh, this really is tough. I mean, when you go back to that, we talked about it a few weeks ago, the South Carolina Kentucky game. The quarterbacking numbers for Kentucky against South Carolina, 6 of 17 for 44 yards and 2 interceptions. That was disgusting to watch. Ole Miss is coming in with a much different looking offense with what should be a lot more playmakers, with obviously Jackson Dart, who should be a Heisman candidate, and they're going to have to pick themselves up off the mat. I'm going to go along with you. I'm picking Ole Miss to win the game, to find a way to beat a good South Carolina team and come away with a victory. Jackson Dart is also my Heisman pick, so I'm hoping for him to do well in this game. But I still believe they have enough to carry them to victory against South Carolina. 9 point spread, you were saying that is a lot for them to carry there, but we'll see if they can cover. Last
Yeah, I
game
think
of our picks. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Finish it
Oh, I
off.
was just gonna say, I think that's more so because Stellars didn't play last week after his injury against LSU, but I think they're having encouraging news that he's doing everything in practice and he'll be ready.
Yeah, scary news. We'll see. Last game, we've got number 8 Miami traveling for an ACC matchup to the West Coast. It'll be at California versus those Golden Bears. Miami is a 10-point favorite, and I think for good right. The only thing here is we just came saw them come off of a rough game against Virginia Tech. They scraped away a victory, but remember, this is a Virginia Tech team that lost to Vanderbilt earlier this year. Cal did they just lost to FSU. Bad loss there, but they beat Auburn in Auburn. Their defense does look really good. This is a big test for Miami, especially going across the country and playing at Cal. And they need to keep it up for Cam Ward's Heisman hopes, for the way that everyone is talking about Miami right now. But the fact of the matter is for them that as as a team in the ACC, their their games haven't been all that much so far. They beat a Florida team who we know is not very good. They beat FAMU, Ball State, USF, and had that game against Virginia Tech, who we don't have that much hope in either. So they haven't really been tested to this point in the season, and they'll really barely be tested for their whole season. Their only ranked matchup for the rest of the year is number 22 Louisville. So they have a big chance to end up undefeated at the end of the season. And this is a huge moment for them. So I'm picking Miami to go across the country and get the victory and keep their undefeated hopes alive.
Yeah, I mean, this one's kind of a tougher one to pick, even though like Miami minus 10. I think Cal, their defense, Justin Wilson out there, their head coach, he's been there forever. And before that, he was USC's defensive coordinator back in the day, and he was probably one of the worst defensive coordinators like we've seen at USC at that time. And then we just didn't know about Alex Grinch yet. But these defenses Cal's been fielding the last couple of years, they're really good, and I think they just make every game just tough on opposing offenses, and they make you earn every yard. Those two touchdowns Florida State scored, I mean, they got, I don't want to say lucky because, a competent quarterback would hit those shots every time, but DJU made some decent throws to get them down the field. And, not much Cal could have done in that instance. But yeah, going up against Miami, I think the biggest kind of, thing to watch in this game is Cal's running game. They got Jaden Ott back for the first time last week, and he did pretty well, 4 yards per carry. And I mean, Miami's rushing defense or run defense did not look good. I mean, the only reason Virginia Tech was in that game was because they kind of ran all over Miami. So I think that's going to be a big point of emphasis. I think going into this, I really wanted to pick Cal. I might, I'm going to go Cal. This is the only game on our
Ooh.
list that I went against the spread, even though
Mm.
the first two technically are upsets, but they're, spread wise, they're winners. But I think Cal, it's in Cal. It's game day. Those Cal fans have been going crazy for whatever reason this year. I mean, I remember right before COVID hit was 2019. USC goes to Cal. I'm at that game. And man, there was more USC fans in the student section than Cal, which was
Wow.
insane to me. But just this year, they just decided to show up. Maybe the Pac-12 was holding them back.
Man, who knows? But a good slate of games this week that I'm excited to see. Glad to see Florida coming off of a bye week, and we'll see them match up against UCF. USC's got a game that we're hoping they take care of as well. And man, some good matchups. And we've got some conference races that are underway, pretty much mostly in conference games now. So we're going to see how the Big Ten, ACC, SEC, Big 12 all fall into place, and it's going to be exciting to watch. Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Swampy Coliseum Podcast. Remember, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram. You can listen on Spotify. Any way you can get access to our content, it's there, and we hope to interact with you in any way possible. For Nathaniel Gilmore, I am Andrew Hudson. We hope you have a great week. See you later, football fans.
See ya.